Has anyone here ever heard of a man named John Kenneth Galbraith? Anybody? Okay, good. John Kenneth Galbraith, for those of us who have not looked him up on Wikipedia, he is a Canadian-born economist, diplomat, and political advisor to a handful of presidents throughout the mid-20th century. And yes, I did look that up on Wikipedia. But I don't really know too much about John Kenneth Galbraith because I'm not going to tell you a story about John Kenneth Galbraith. I'm going to tell you a story about John Kenneth Galbraith's housekeeper, Emily Gloria Wilson. Emily Gloria Wilson was Mr. Galbraith's housekeeper, and one day he came home from work and asked to be left alone. Undisturbed, he went to his study, probably laid down on the couch, and took a nap. Emily went about her duties in the house, and then the phone rang. She answers it. The person on the phone says, "Excuse me, is John Kenneth Galbraith available? I need to talk to him." The housekeeper said, "I'm sorry, he is not available at this time." "No, I don't think you heard me correctly. I need to talk to Mr. Galbraith immediately." "No, sir, I don't think you heard me correctly. He is not available." "Excuse me, this is President Lyndon B. Johnson, and I would like to talk to John Kenneth Galbraith." "I'm sorry, sir, but no." Click. John Kenneth Galbraith woke up, asked, "Did I have any calls?" There was this one. John Kenneth Galbraith returns the call, and the first words out of President Johnson's mouth, "Who is that woman, and can I hire her?" Saying no at times is difficult in our world full of yes. We live in a world of yes, 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 yes. And no can be a divine gift. Sabbath is a divine no. Now we hear this invitation to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy in today's text from Exodus. And within the text itself, we hear the echoes back to Genesis 2 to be specific. Just after the 6 days of creation, God worked and created and did all of those things. And on the seventh day, God took a nap. God said, "Hold my phone calls." God said no. Now we have to remember that Sabbath does not just connect to creation, but it also has built into it liberation. For these people hearing this command in Exodus, these people who have recently left their vocation as slaves to step into the vocation as freed people of God, they used to be forced to work, not just 6 days, but 7. And now they hear their God giving them the divine gift of no, of rest, of Sabbath. And as we look closely at this particular commandment of the 10, it's those 10 commandments that I'm pretty sure you all have Charlton Heston's voice stuck in your head for right now, there's one thing that I think stands out: the first word of the commandment, where the 10 commandments are full of thou shalt nots. Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. Okay, good, I got what I'm not supposed to do. And then comes this commandment: remember. God doesn't say, thou shalt not work all the time. God says, remember the Sabbath. Remember. Now, when I think about the connection this commandment has to that creation story, perhaps the miracle of the creation story is not that God created everything, because in our world today, we're really good at doing a lot of work. The miracle is that God took a day off. In the midst of our something inside of us telling us to constantly do more, here comes an invitation to simply be. Now that's truly a miracle. It's easy, as the prophet Rihanna reminds us, to work. But it can be difficult to to Sabbath. Just up the Metro North a ways, Dr. Lori Santos greeted her class at Yale University with slips of paper that explained, "No class today." It was mid-semester, and all the students had exams and papers approaching around the midterm time, and everyone was stressed out and exhausted. Only this class announcement was not just a bonus study hall, take a break and go work on other homework. There was one rule to this class announcement. For the next 75 minutes, you were not allowed to use this free time to work on any homework or any assignments. You had to simply enjoy it. Because the miracle is not doing the work, the miracle is taking time to rest. 9 students hugged her. 2 students started crying. And the 1,200 students who were taking Dr. Santos' class, Psychology and the Good Life, 1,200 students, nearly 1/4 of the entire Yale student body, suddenly found themselves settling into an unexpected and much needed Sabbath. Dr. Santos designed this class after she realized that many students were stressed out, unhappy, grinding through long, crushing, and joyless days. I'm pretty sure the research could stretch beyond students for that one. On this day of the surprise Sabbath, Dr. Santos had planned to give a lecture on what researchers have learned about how important time is to Sabbath, to rest, to happiness. And she realized that the best way to teach this lecture was to cancel her class. This was not a break. This was an immersion. One student, a senior, visited the Yale University Art Gallery for the first time in her 4 years at New Haven. Another student had skipped lunch that day because he was studying for another midterm, and suddenly he was delighted to have time not just to eat some food, but to enjoy every bite. A sophomore was drawn to all the ways he might spend this extra afternoon, throwing a frisbee with some friends, taking a walk, playing some music in the dorm. He just decided to take a nap. God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it, God took a nap. God rested from all the work that God had done. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Remember the Sabbath, it's not just about slowing down. It's about being made whole. All of the pieces that pull us apart, schedules and tasks and deadlines and to-do lists, and that thing you're thinking about doing this afternoon. Sabbath is an invitation to be brought back together. Because that word remember, well, it's not just the opposite of forget. Remember the Sabbath, forget the Sabbath. Remember is also the opposite of dismember. We find ourselves pulled apart, dismembered. In fact, we do that to the Sabbath. We put it in a corner, build walls around it, call it Saturday or the weekend, and then we justify working 80+ hours a week because we're going to live for the weekend, but when we get there, we simply crash and collapse. That's not rest. That's exhaustion. We need to remember the Sabbath, to find it into every corner and breath of our lives. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel literally wrote a book on the Sabbath called The Sabbath. It's fantastic. You should all read it. He, in an interview about the Sabbath, he said this: "The Sabbath is as a lonely day among 6 vulgar days of the week can never survive. The Sabbath put in a box can never survive. Unless there's a little bit of Sabbath on Wednesday, there can be no Sabbath on Saturday. Unless there's a little bit of Sabbath every day, there can't be Sabbath on just the one day. We need to remember the Sabbath, to bring the Sabbath into our lives. And when we do, when we remember the Sabbath, we discover that the Sabbath remembers us. The Sabbath takes all the parts of ourselves that have been pulled and pushed and told to live up to the expectations of Instagram likes and climbing corporate ladders and whatever the next thing might be. And Sabbath tells you that just as you are whole. You are holy. You are good. And you are loved. The Sabbath remembers us and tells us that we are not human doings. At least I hope not. We are human beings. Sabbath is not a command to do, but an invitation to be remembered. And it's fitting that we talk about this on the first Sunday in June as we begin Pride Month. Because in this way of Sabbath as remembering, Sabbath remembering us, I see Pride Month as a sort of Sabbath. This month when we remind all of our LGBTQIA siblings, sisters, and brothers that you are whole and holy, you are good and loved. In a world, and sadly in too many churches, that tell you you are not, Sabbath, Pride Month, remembers you. And if Rabbi Heschel said, unless there's a little bit of Sabbath on Wednesday, there can't be Sabbath on Saturday, I would say unless there's a little bit of Pride Month in January, there can't be Pride Month in June. It's something we celebrate 12 months of the year. Our world builds walls. In fact, we seem to make sports of it. We push people out. We separate families across invisible lines drawn in the sand between my country and yours. We need a Sabbath practice that extends beyond our weekend and remembers, reintegrates, reunites all those who are in need. In a few moments, we will go to this table right here. A table where we hear the words, "Do this in remembrance of me." We come to this table to be remembered, to be filled up so we can go out into the world and remember all that has been torn apart. As you come to this table today, may you find it to be an invitation, not to do, but simply to be, reminding you that you are never a human doing, you are always a human being. May we remember the Sabbath and discover that the Sabbath remembers us. Amen.